Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, December 30th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 election results and discussing why I personally believe that Donald Trump could have won the 2020 election had it not been for COVID-19. And I think this is something that many people didn't necessarily want to believe prior to the election. When we saw this discussion come up, it was very clear that many Republican surrogates had said this was an absolute certainty, and many Democratic surrogates had said absolutely not. Donald Trump is someone who has been vilified by members of the Democratic Party for the past 4 years, and arguably, rightfully so. In a number of instances, Donald Trump went against the Democratic Party's wishes, which makes sense. He's the Republican president. But with a number of leadership issues, especially handling the COVID-19 pandemic, it was no longer that Donald Trump was moving away from the majority of the country in terms of what policies they wanted to see enacted, but also just mishandling a virus that has killed hundreds of thousands of American people. And if you're looking at the COVID-19 rates that we've seen across the country, it's not getting better. The country is not getting better. And while we are at a point where a vaccine has been distributed, Donald Trump paid the price of being the incumbent who mishandled, in many cases, parts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Once Donald Trump actually started talking about COVID-19, it wasn't as if he was the candidate who was taking it the most serious. Obviously, Joe Biden was one of the more cautious candidates, holding rallies that were 10, 20, 30 people at size, which obviously is nowhere near Donald Trump in terms of size comparison, but we are in the middle of a pandemic. But looking at the election results, even with Donald Trump, as someone who was impeached by the House of Representatives, one of 3 presidents in United States history who was impeached, with so many things that went on in 2017, 2018, 2019, up until 2020, when COVID-19 officially swept the nation around March and April, that's when Donald Trump started to take continuous hits. And without COVID-19, we could have seen Donald Trump win his election. Because looking at how close the margins were right now, I find it very difficult to believe that Donald Trump would have lost. Because Donald Trump was still able to win a very significant portion of the American electorate, despite being someone who is disapproved of by the overwhelming majority of Americans. On top of that, in terms of the way that he was handling the COVID-19 pandemic, he was disapproved of on that as well. Donald Trump had a very small period of time where he was approved of, but other than that, we never really saw him reach the top, and we never really saw him reach the positive approval rating. And looking at Wisconsin, looking at Michigan, looking at Pennsylvania, these are states where the economy is probably one of the most important issues. There's a reason why all 3 of them went red back in 2016. They had gone blue for 24, 28 years, depending on the state, and Donald Trump was the first Republican to flip it. Well, this election, Joe Biden won back the Rust Belt, and he was the first Democrat to win Georgia in 28 years and Arizona in 24 years, both of which last time when they voted for a Democrat was under President Bill Clinton. So when you're looking at the states that Joe Biden did well in, you have to ask yourself, would he have done well if there was not a COVID-19 situation? Now, I do think that when you're looking at a lot of the attacks on President Trump, a lot of what the Democratic Party did in terms of attacking him in the campaign season was justified, because a lot of what Donald Trump had done in the past did not help his campaign. Whether it was speaking about white supremacists in 2017, that very fine people comment is something that laid with American voters for the next 3 years, and something that even through the debates that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party used against President Trump. Everything he had done was always being watched. From day one, even before then, his comments were used against him. You can see some Democrats actually using the Access Hollywood tape as something in the past. And while that may not have mattered too much to American voters in 2016 because they had more important issues, COVID-19 was something that really took away from the rest of that discourse. Yes, the Biden campaign, the Democratic Party did focus on a lot of what Trump did, but the main focus of this election was COVID-19. The main focus was the economy. 2 regions where Donald Trump actually lacked in. The economy was an area where Donald Trump was able to enjoy very strong successes. Had the election been held on just the economy alone, I believe he would have won more electoral votes than he did in 2016. But obviously that's not the case. And Donald Trump was that candidate who really tried to tout his economic ability to recover the United States from, even what was a very strong economy under President Obama. That's why Obama was such a favorable president, why he was liked by a lot of the American people. And when you're looking at what Donald Trump really tried to push off was that Donald Trump was going to be the only candidate who could bring America to a point where they were doing very well financially. And, economic-wise, I think that Obama did a very good job. Donald Trump did also a good job at continuing what Obama had done previously. You can't deny that the trend started under Obama. Now, obviously, different policies were implemented, but you can't say that Obama had no effect on the outcome of the economy. And I've seen people try to counter that argument by saying, couldn't you say Bush did? Absolutely not. Recession versus full recovery, not even comparable. But when you're looking at Trump's economic continuation over the next 3 years leading up to 2020, that was very good. That's why a lot of what Trump's talking points were: lowest black unemployment rate, lowest minority unemployment rate, lowest unemployment rate across the country. The reason why he brought up those points, even through the COVID-19 pandemic, is because he tried to remind the American people of what the economy was like prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. But because many Americans associated with COVID-19 with President Trump, he paid the price for that at the ballot box. Because as those reports started coming out about Donald Trump knowing the very severe effects of COVID-19 before even telling the American people, was something that obviously didn't play well. That obviously was not something the American people wanted to hear. That the President of the United States knowingly knew how dangerous COVID-19 would be and then waited 2 months to act on it. And the fact that there was no real national mask mandate, a lot of them were implemented state by state, but no national mask mandate, was something that really hurt President Trump, I think, because President Trump was all for liberty, all for allowing you to be exposed to COVID-19 to not wear a mask. And it makes sense because he's a more conservative, more traditional candidate. But also, had he taken COVID-19 more seriously, the economy may not have suffered too much as a result. And many people may have actually seen that President Trump took it seriously and were more inclined to vote for him. But because Donald Trump did not take COVID seriously, even to a point where he got the virus, well, I can't imagine that too many Americans thought of that as good leadership. That someone who was in the most protected bubble in the United States still was exposed to a virus. The overwhelming majority of the American people have not gotten COVID-19. They have not tested positive for COVID-19. Donald Trump, however, has. So like I said, leadership was also something that the Biden campaign really tried to attack Donald Trump on, trying to say that Joe Biden would be a better leader for the American people. And obviously that messaging worked. But almost every single political ad had to do with COVID-19, had to do with the economic fallout as a result of COVID-19. Yes, the Black Lives Matter issue campaign really took off ground after we saw George Floyd and a number of other unfortunate situations with police officers that really inspired a lot of Americans, really inspired a lot of the American people to actually protest, to actually fight for something more, to fight for civil liberties. But I don't think that's something that overtook COVID-19 in terms of importance in this election to the American people. When you look at all of the exit polling data, many Americans said that COVID-19 and the economy were top two in their minds. But race relations was a very close third. And if you're looking at the results of this election, the fact it was so close when we expected it to be much larger. We can actually take a look at the 538 projections. We expected this to be a much more significant win for Joe Biden. But looking at the actual results, the fact it was this close, even with a global pandemic on the hands of Donald Trump, it doesn't matter if it was his fault or not. He's the incumbent president. He is going to be the one viewed as responsible. Looking at Pennsylvania, looking at Michigan, looking at Wisconsin, looking at Georgia, looking at Arizona, it's very hard for me to conclude that had COVID-19 had not been in this scenario whatsoever, that Donald Trump would have actually lost the election. Because even with the Black Lives Matter movement, and even with everything else that the Democratic Party has tried to use against Donald Trump from the past 4 years, I think COVID-19 was the deal breaker. Because there are tens of millions of Americans who have been personally affected by COVID-19. Every American knows the severity, or at least knows, but sometimes willfully ignoring the severity of COVID-19. And I think gains that Donald Trump made by continuing an economy, continuing to keep the economy in a very strong position, that was something that helped him. But once the economic fallout happened as a result of COVID-19, and if someone was voting based off the economy, if it's not in a good position, they might not be too inclined to vote for Donald Trump because he is the incumbent president who is there under that position. And with just a 1% shift in favor of the Republican Party, Donald Trump would have been at a 269-269 tie. And based off the House of Representatives results, I have no doubt that Donald Trump would have been chosen by the House of Representatives to be the next president of the United States. But that is obviously a what-if scenario. I think that actually Donald Trump could have expanded his 2016 victories. I think Joe Biden was a strong candidate, but Donald Trump in many ways had a very loyal base that Joe Biden did not. Joe Biden won based off independence. Joe Biden won based off possibly some Republican crossover, third-party voters from 2016. Donald Trump just narrowly improved off his 2016 victories in some of these states and still won. Joe Biden did better than Hillary Clinton, but he did so by winning over a not-so-solid base. Donald Trump has shown us with his highest approval rating amongst Republicans, one of the highest approval ratings for a Republican president amongst Republicans, and still only being a one-term president, that his base was there for him. They showed up, and they showed up in very large amounts. But the problem was for them that the Biden campaign also turned up in very large amounts. But I just want to point out, given the fact that this election was exceptionally close, I do believe that if COVID-19 had not been in this situation whatsoever, that Donald Trump would have had a very easy pathway to re-election. There's always the possibility that he would have lost without COVID-19, but there is a huge possibility and probability that he would have won if COVID-19 was not in this scenario. Because COVID is something that affected, like I had mentioned, every American, practically every American. You may not know someone personally who was affected by COVID-19, but it has affected you in one way or another. And without it, if people were okay with living under the status quo, then they probably would have voted for the incumbent. Because if you're fine with how you're living right now, you're probably not going to vote for the other candidate, just because you want a continuation of how you're doing right now. But obviously, that is a huge what-if scenario. This is all just discussion about a potential outcome of an election if COVID-19 had not been there. But obviously, COVID-19 was something that really was in the minds of many American voters as they went to the ballot box, as they filled in their mail-in ballot. So looking at the election results, it was close, but there's always that possibility that the result could have been the same. Just personally thinking, I don't think it would have been. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.